So it's that time again when you need to visit the supermarket and buy groceries. You head in alone, and you already know what you need to get. Some onions, tomatoes, lettuce, just your run-of-the-mill produce. But you notice most of the food is at its prime. It only lasts at least a day or two. On the label, on the tomato you see in your hand, you notice that it came all the way from Mexico. That's a long way from the vine. That means it had to be picked, processed, boxed, shipped, driven by air, unloaded, and stocked before sitting in the palm of your hand. You wonder, where could you buy fresh produce weekly? Well, why not stop at your local farmer's market? There you can find all the greens you need, plus they come with a friendly smile and a deep appreciation for the purchase you made. Today I want to outline for you the benefits of purchasing locally grown produce from your neighborhood farmers. It benefits the community, it's eco-friendly, and there's a friendly personal experience. Purchasing from a person rather than a big name store like Food for Less or Sprouts means you're investing and giving back to your community rather than a large profit company. A farmer would rather use that money on his or her local supplier for items they would need. Gary Capel, professor of biology and director of the graduate program in biodiversity, conversation and policy at the State University of New York at Albany, in his book, The Emergent Agriculture, states that his friend Thomas Christenfield and his wife Liz, who owns a farm in Valley Falls, New York, in rural Washington County, grows excellent vegetables that he sells through CSA, the Community Supported Agriculture Program. Every April, each of the 350 families of the Ledge Farm CSA writes a check to Thomas for about $500. Thomas uses that money to buy his seeds, pay his help and the mortgage, and put a little money aside, hopefully if the tractor doesn't break down. Every week from June through late October, early November, each shareholder gets a box of vegetables. Usually the boxes start out pretty light. Some greens and lettuce by late June, however. The boxes improve with manner of colorful produce. There's a description of vegetables in the week's share and some recipes, usually involving olive oil, garlic, and skillet. All in all, shareholders come away with well over $500 worth of vegetables and some pretty inspiring reading. This is proof that when you buy from a local farmer, they tend to use the money to fortify their production of produce and enhancing their farming technology in order to sustain a local farming community, creating a cycle of money put into their farming economy. Capel also includes in his own personal farming or local marketing story. His story is this. I bake breads for a farmer's market. I can produce about 130 loaves of bread in about 24 hours. I sell those loaves for about $6 each. I generally sell all my bread in less than 3 hours. It costs me about $2 for the ingredients in most of the breads that I bake, other than the cost of running my ovens and transportation and clearing $4, which is 200% per loaf. What are my customers paying for? Well, they're paying for me. It's not just my time. They're paying for my skill as a baker and as an artisan, and oversee the development of as many as 20 doughs at a time. It's a craft. Capel explains how his bread stand can create a small economy on its own. He uses the money for supplies and items he needs in order to create more bread for his customers while gaining a small profit. Hearing these stories really lets us know how convenient local farming can be. Now, how much better would it be if we can buy locally instead of out of state? Local farmers are in the nearby area. It's so convenient and eco-friendly that their drive has less of an impact. on our carbon footprint, saving our planet one food mile at a time. An article written by Dean Baker, PhD in economics. The average food item in the U.S. travels 1,500 miles from farmer to customer. That's equivalent of a little more than halfway across the country from California towards New York, going at least 70 miles per hour without stops for 1,500 miles is about 21 hours and 26 minutes. According to a Journal of Food Science and Technology, food miles is a relatively recent issue which has arisen over food transportation. A simple definition of this concept would be the numbers of miles a product has to be transported from farmers to the growers to various stages of production until it reaches the supermarket and finally the plate of customers. It has been born out of concern for the environment, especially in regard to greenhouse gas emissions such as carbon dioxide and the global warming. As food miles consume a considerable amount of energy, other important issues include the mode of transportation and the production method. This goes to show by creating a healthier environment and a healthier you starts your movement towards local farming and its purpose. Speaking about perks, how nice would it be to gain a new friend? Living in America, especially in California, it's busy. Getting from one place to another nonstop and working hard for our share, it gets lonely. Somehow you lose time. But shopping at local farmers markets, you're greeted with a friendly and warm smile and experience. These farmers want to make a healthy relationship with you. They appreciate your purchase. Within the article, growing local food movements, farmers markets as a node for productions and community. A study was conducted with local community farmers and their customers. This was their feedback. The dialogue surrounding community provided more noticeable trends among producers. I've indicated that the personal relationships within the LFS, local food supply, contribute to community. For example, you buy from someone because you're their neighbor. We have a direct relationship with all our customers and we know them, their kids since they were babies. It's always nice to see people catching up and chatting about life. It's not something you can get every time you head into the supermarket. Maybe sometimes you bump into someone you know from high school and you chat, but it's not the same when you go to actual farmer's market and purchase from a local farmer. Based on these main points on local produce, when you're investing in your local economy, less food miles save the planet, overall friendlier experience, and buying your produce, wouldn't you want to be a part of a great community?
I don't think so either. Jason's supposed to do the written evaluation, and Andrea, are you still in the class, Andrea? Yeah, apparently not, so we don't have to worry about that too much. I like the visualization that you have in the introduction, the description of, the tomatoes from the vine and what it all have to go through, and you kind of try to create an alternative version with the locally grown foods, and I like the lead in, and you had a good transition to your purpose statement. There's also a pretty good preview of what the supporting structure is, so I think you've set things up nicely at the beginning of the presentation. Also, the supporting material, you're very consistent about citing information. There was one place, though, you had an example, and it took 3 times as long to cite the source for the example as it did to give the example. It's like, Professor so-and-so, who's the thing of this and that, who wrote this book, this and this, talks about his friends Bob and Smith, and finally we get to the example. I thought, holy criminy, I hope the example is worth it. It was pretty good, but it was just one of those things, like there was a lot of data there before we actually got to the point that you were trying to make. The shareholder process that you're talking about concerning, like kind of this local collective sort of thing, I think you need to tell us a little bit more about how typical those sorts of things are. It seems like it might be a fairly unique situation or circumstance, or maybe it's very typical. I don't really know. All I got was the description of the one that you're talking about, where people are paying at one point in the year, and then they get food for a long period of time, like whatever it is, 7 months of the growing season, and they get to, like in phases, I guess you get different varieties of food at different times of the year. So that sounds like it might be desirable, especially if you want the fresh produce that you're describing here. But again, I don't know if that's a unique situation that exists in that one place, or if this is a typical kind of thing. And since you're, it's not quite a persuasive speech, but you're kind of suggesting that this would be something that's desirable to do. Well, how do we find those kinds of things? How would we get involved in something like that? I mean, if I knew a bunch of farmers, I'd say, hey, I got this idea, but I don't know any farmers. It's not one of those things that I encounter. Unless I go to the farmer's market, then maybe there's a way that they do that kind of thing at farmer's markets. So I felt a little bit less informed about that one thing that you were talking about than I could have been. I like the description of it, but I think I needed more. You had a good organization set up at the beginning of the speech, and I didn't catch the transitions on the second point, but when you got to the third point, there was actually not only a kind of a clever verbal transition, but you also had a picture that went along with it, and I thought that helped quite a bit. That one shot of the farmer standing next to the tractor was up there an awful long time, and it didn't really add anything to what you were talking about. Most of the images are generated at creating interest or making a transition from one idea to another. The one that does generate a little bit of information is the transportation one, where you've got the map about how far foods might have to travel. I think some reference, as you made references in your presentation to the miles traveled and the costs on the environment, that kind of thing, it might have made sense to have some of that information on that diagram so we could kind of see what the long-term costs were going to be and maybe measure those sorts of things. So the visuals were fine. They met the minimum requirements. I think you could probably add a little bit more to them. The thing, I don't want to yell at people too much about this, but the delivery issues, you do want to work on that. That's what we're going to that's basically what this next assignment is all about, is doing a better job about delivering your speeches. And a lot of people are still doing a lot of reading, and that's what you do here. It really feels like sometimes all you're doing is reading words off of the page there instead of engaging us with the presentation, so you're going to have to work on that. All right, thank you.